Hi, everyone. Fran here. 40 years ago, did you have any understanding that you would be doing what you are today? I know I didn't. My guest on Hopenning this week is an author by the name of Niamh McAnally. Niamh McAnally was raised in not so sunny Ireland in the 60s and 70s. At the age of 12, she and her family took their first trip to a sunny, warm country in the winter, and that was Spain. And after that, Niamh knew that she would be following sunshine for the rest of her life. Since then, she has visited 70 countries and found herself single, homeless, and jobless in her mid-50s. And she shared with us how that all changed. I hope you stay with me, and welcome to the Hopenning. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hopenning. This is the place where hope is happening, and it's a privilege and an honor to have author and world traveler Niamh McAnally with me today. Welcome, Niamh.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you and lovely to be with you today.
You've traveled to so many countries. I love the way you have in your book, Following Sunshine, and the subtitle is A Voyage Around the Mind, the World, and Around the Heart. And so, for any of our viewers that love a good adventure story with some romance thrown in, as well as nonfiction, Niamh is the author you need to read. So, welcome, Niamh.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
So today we're talking about hope and how
Mhm.
travel can bring us hope. And you came from a background that we might expect you to have traveled a lot when you were young. Your parents were both actors. You were born in Ireland. And so, because of your background, I know that there will be people out there like me who probably thought, yeah, she had all kinds of money. So, tell us a little bit about how that was for you. Your dad, Ray McAnally, was an actor with some very famous people. And actually, Liam Neeson wrote a review in your book. It's in the
Mhm.
foreword. So, how did all that play out for you, Neve?
Well, you're absolutely correct, but my both of my parents were freelance actors. So that meant a lot of the time they didn't know where the next job was coming from. So money was not something that was a guarantee. They did an incredible job. They raised four children. We always had food on the table. We always had a roof over our head. But we weren't running around with extravagant cars or anything else like that. My mother had a little mini, like before minis became fashionable. And we lived in a modest house, and then in one point, my father moved us out to a house by the sea, which was a huge push for him in terms of putting a mortgage together. But of course, like I was a child at that stage, I was about 7, I think, when we moved there. That actually gave me my love of the sea because I grew up right by the sea. But yeah, they worked hard at making ends meet, if you like. And like I said, they never knew when the next job was coming. So for us, the very, very first time actually I left Ireland to go on a trip, we were 12. I was 12. My sister, I think, was 13 at the time. And that was because my father had been cast in a particular movie. And I think it was on the first day, it turned out that the other co-star thought the two of them wouldn't get along. And at that point, the other person was a little bit more well known. And of course, the producers said, okay, Ray, here you go. Been nice knowing you, but here's your check for the 5 weeks you're supposed to be working on this movie. And so what did my dad do? He put some money away for a rainy day. And then he said, okay, we're going on our first overseas holiday. And that was to Spain. And to me, what happened was it was February, I believe, and it was the middle of an Irish winter. And of course, I was used to really cold, dark, wet, windy Februarys. And when we got there, I found out that it was like, oh my goodness, there's a place here where the sun shines in the middle of winter and there's blue skies. And that's actually what sparked my love for travel. It's like, oh, as soon as I grow up, I'm going to go somewhere where it's like warm and I can live overseas. So, but yeah, it wasn't that we had money falling out of our pockets to go travel. So I had to learn a ways around that and figure out ways that you could travel with a tiny, tiny budget. And that kind of has been my way about it.
And you did it because I didn't count how many countries that you talk about in the book,
Mm.
but dozens, right?
Yeah, actually, at this stage, I think I've been to over just under 70 countries, I think, at this stage. So I'm working my way through it.
Yeah, and still working your way through it. So, if I were to ask your closest high school friends, or maybe your high school teacher, what Niamh McAnally was like in high school, what would they say?
What would they say? Actually, I'm still friends with a couple of my schoolmates from Santa Sabine I went to in Dublin, right there in Sutton. What would they say? My uh well, there'd be two categories. Like my friends would probably say I was a goody two shoes. I always was paying attention in school. I wasn't running around as a rebel. And yet at the same time, when I was about what age would I have been? About maybe 10 or 11, everybody was wearing jeans at that point, like outside of school. We had a school uniform. And I wanted a pair of jeans. And of course, speaking of finances, my mother wasn't going to go out and buy us the latest pair of jeans, but she was very resilient and she created this pair of jeans for us. She bought denim and she was going to make them. Now they were like they were definitely not fashionable because they had that like an elastic banded waist that she fed the elastic band through. So I thought, oh my God, I'm going to look ridiculous. So what I asked her to do was instead of having the blue denim on the outside, I wanted the inside to be the outside. So it was kind of like that pale gray kind of denim. So I wore those. And of course I thought, well, I'm not trying to fit in, but at the same time, I want to be the same as everybody else. Anyway, the reason they would say that I was a bit of a rebel in that respect was at the time, I was the head girl of the junior school. And I wore them, and there was myself and about four or five other girls. We wore our jeans underneath our school uniforms. It was like a green tunic, and because it was so cold out in the playground area, it was just like I'm wearing these like when we're outside. And of course, we got into trouble. We're not supposed to be wearing jeans to school, so I got stripped of my head girl status. So that was my big rebellious moment. Insofar as my teachers were concerned, again, I think they would have mostly said, I tried to apply myself in the educational system. One of the things that the funniest thing is like I'm good at writing, but I'm not very good at math. And one of my maths teachers said to me one day, sorry, on my report, almost my final exam, it said 38%. And I showed that to my husband recently, exactly like that. It was kind of like, oh my goodness, that's terrible. And I go, no, it wasn't, because there was a comment next to it which said, much improved.
So you're high in writing and probably reading skills
Hmm.
and low in math, which I mean, if your instructor was saying good job, well, great effort. Do you think that there was some type of a learning disability that you had?
I wouldn't call it a learning disability. No, I think it was lack of interest, to be perfectly honest. Do you know what I mean? I was always drawn to English, to languages. I loved French as well. I loved stories. I enjoyed history. Actually, we had a really good history teacher, Miss Shannon, I remember, because she made stories out of the history. It wasn't, 1066, the Battle of Hastings. It wasn't drumming dates and events into our heads. It was telling us the story of how it all happened. So I just think I leaned more towards the right brain creative stuff than I did the engineer's mind. Now my sister's magnificent in math. She's actually a computer scientist. She's superb. So it's different talents, I guess, And so I never really leaned into it. And even still, it's I have a hard time kind of, doing math in my head.
So you talk about a love of languages.
Mhm.
So after high school, what did you do, and how did that help you later on with all of your travels?
Well, interestingly enough, in English class, just before we finished, the equivalent of high school in Ireland is called secondary school. And we have a national exam for what would be the equivalent of graduation. So everybody across the country gets the same exam on the same day. So if you get an A in history in Dublin, it's the same as an A in history in Galway, for instance. So in English, for that course, we studied a piece by, it was actually a series of essays by Cardinal Newman, and it was called The Idea of a University. And in it, he described that a university was a gathering place of learners and scholars from every quarter. And so the idea was you got a big mix of ideas and backgrounds. And at the time, Ireland was very much a homogenous society. This is the end of the 70s. And so I kind of felt, well, you know what, I'm not really going to experience that here in Ireland. So that's why I decided to go to Paris, France, and that way I could, study French language and be immersed in the country. I think that's the best way to learn any language, if you can, is to go and be immersed in it and not be speaking in your native language. Because it's one thing if two people go off and, you go and you learn classes, but you're speaking in your own language as well. It doesn't kind of give you the same experience. Now, in Ireland, we had Irish language as one of our major courses. Everybody had to do it. In fact, certainly at the time, you couldn't get a job in the government in Ireland unless you spoke Irish and you could read and write it. And the west and the southwest of Ireland was very interesting. Most people still spoke Irish, or a lot of people did. So people in Dublin that were being raised maybe in Irish at home, maybe not, were sent off to what they called Irish College down in the country, and they would be living within the house where Irish was spoken the whole time. So from that point of view, I mean, I understood there is another way to say, here's a pen in two different languages. So learning a third one is always easier. So anyway, I decided to go to France and I absolutely loved it. I loved the language and I loved the country, and Paris was a really wonderful. Yeah, I was 17 going on 18 at the time. It was an amazing experience.
So, Neef, if you started traveling right after high school, 17 and 18, and you spent
Mhm.
that year, I would assume that you strapped your backpack on and you traveled all the countries of Europe. You did the Europe thing, which, I think in the late 70s, a lot of young people were doing. Strap that backpack on, go traveling with a friend for a year, and get all the stamps on your passport. I think that was probably before the EU came in.
But the EU is actually the beginning of the 70s. Yeah,
Okay.
72, I think we went on to monitor. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that what you did?
No, believe it or not, at that point, then I came back to Dublin and I started working in theatre. And I started out as the lowest rung, we used to say, the assistant stage manager in theatre and getting some walk-on parts. And eventually that progressed into television. And I went and became, sorry, I became a theatre director first and then moved into television and became a television director. And so it was kind of following in my parents' footsteps in that respect. So I did that for a number of years before I really took off and started volunteer traveling. And that was to go and live in people's homes or in local communities and volunteer and really get to understand the country and what it's like to live there, as opposed to come as a tourist, let's say.
The first time that you actually worked as a volunteer, what was happening in your life at the time so that it made volunteering, rather than stepping in as a tourist, maybe off a cruise ship or just flying in and spending a couple of weeks on the beach, what was happening in your life at the time that would spur this on?
Well, I had done a project in 1993, which was to volunteer on the one of the islands off the coast of Belize, where they were working on creating a marine sanctuary. And I was a scuba diver instructor at that time. And myself and my then boyfriend went and we lived on this tiny little island off the coast of Belize for about 4 months and worked with the scientists and documenting the algae, the fish, and the corals and sponges and all that good stuff. Once I had done that, I was very much into the whole idea of volunteer traveling and understanding that. And then if you spool forward until 2010, I was now living on the island of Sark in the UK Channel Islands, just off the coast of France, and I was managing a hotel. And at the end of 2014, the hotels closed and said they weren't going to open for 2015. And I had been living in staff accommodation. It was an island without any cars, and suddenly I found myself without a job, without a home. And I thought, well, where am I going to go now? And at that point, I was now in my mid 50s. I had been married in the United States for a while and I had since got divorced. So it was kind of like, where do I go from here? It was a major, major crossroads. And I revisited that idea of volunteer traveling. And I had found this website called workaway.info. And I'd found it the previous year because I had to lay off a bunch of employees when the hotels went from year round to seasonal. And so I said, well, here you go. We need you to come back in the springtime. So you could go to any of these countries, volunteer. And the platform suggested that you volunteer 5 hours a day, 5 days a week in exchange for food and lodging. So that was a great way. All they had to do was pay for their either airfare if they were going long distance or travel array or train or whatever to get there. So when the hotel closed for political reasons, it closed the following year for 2015. I said, that's it. I am now going to take out this year and I'm going to travel the world, like circumnavigate by plane, not by boat, and travel around the world and live as a volunteer for 12 months and see what that experience brings to me. So that's really what spurred it on. So there was a combination between something that would be good to do, but also, I mean, it was very self-serving in one way. It meant that I could, have a roof over my head and something to eat while I was working with other people. And I had saved up a little bit of money enough to get me the airfare to get from A to B. But I was, like I said, housed and fed in all these locations. So it was a very inexpensive way to go travel and see the world.
The part of me that's the non-risk taker would say, but weren't you afraid?
I know the amount of people who said that to me. Oh, are you going to, you're going to be afraid. You can't go off. You're a single woman. You're in your 50s. And at that point, actually, I did put everything I owned into a backpack and off I took. But what I've come to learn is if you let anybody else's fear for you infect you, it will hold you back. And for me, I had to go, I feel confident in myself. I know things that you just from living a bit of life is you walk down the street, you're not looking at a map, you're not looking at your phone, you walk with a bit of purpose, you put your shoulders back and you go as though you know where you're going, even if you don't. And then if you have to dip into a restaurant to go to the bathroom and then look at a map and figure out where you are, that's how you do it. So you give off an air as though you belong. And also, I think one of the most important things, especially for women traveling alone, is you listen and feel for the hairs on the back of your neck. Because the only time I've been steered wrong is when I didn't listen to my gut instincts. And that I think is one of the most important things we do. And it's never one big thing coming at you. It's usually a little thing. And if you ignore it, go, and then another little thing on top of that. And it's a combination of a bunch of little things that causes the problem. So you find yourself in a bad situation. So yeah, my family at the time thought I was crazy, but I think they thought I was crazy anyway, whether I stayed or go or went, because I was always off running and doing different things. Unlike some of my siblings who had a similar, like the same career throughout their lives, mine, I think I have had now 5 careers in 5 different industries. So and that goes back actually to my parents and the upbringing of the theater and then working on one job and not knowing where the next came from. So not only was I used to variety and change, I actually became addicted to variety and change. And I love that. Okay, here's something new. Let's try this. And it was all about experiences and never about stuff for me. Like things don't really excite me. But experiences and going to places and meeting new people and learning that it doesn't matter what side of the world you come from, it doesn't matter what your social or economic background is, at a core level, we're all the same. It's like we're all looking for love. We all want to be loved. We all want our lives to matter. And we want to bring joy to other people and laughter. And I think essentially we're all the same.
So, of all the places that you've been, you've said almost 70 countries. Which countries were the most life-changing? And it might not be the best place, like we can put a label. What was the best place you ever went? This is more life-changing that actually changed you and how you see the world, or maybe how you see yourself and how you believe in the world. Which places and what stories can you tell us?
Well, the first one that comes to mind was in the country of Fiji. The people in Fiji are extraordinarily jovial. I have a line in Following Sunshine. It's like they seem to laugh at everything and they laughed at nothing. I mean, they were always bubbling up with laughter. And I really, embraced that. And I thought, I actually turned that into a mission for myself that, my real mission in life is I need to make somebody laugh every day. And the beauty of it is if I haven't made somebody laugh by the end of the day, I can go through my own life and find something that was really funny and start laughing about that. So I can't really fail. While I was in Fiji, I was down to do a course, one of Tony Robbins' course called Life Mastery. And one of the very first things, you get off an airplane, you've flown in how many miles, and one of the first things they do is after your first lunch is they bring you to this big field, and there's the equivalent of a telephone pole, which I think is about 60 foot tall, and it had rungs on it. And the idea was you were to climb this pole, get to the top, then jump off to a trapeze in front of you, and then that was the exercise. And I went through a bit of a metamorphosis during that climb because I do have a sort of sense of competition about myself. I've always been in a situation where, well, let's say I had a poster on my wall when I was a kid of a bunch of little ducks. And the message on the poster was either lead or follow or get out of the way. And whatever situation I've been in, I've always automatically ended up as a leader, not necessarily by choice, but it's like, oh, well, you should be the leader. Or, it's something where I step up and try and, see a way forward for people. And for that reason, in my mind, when I decided to do this, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to show everybody how to climb a pole. I was terrified of doing it. I didn't know whether I could do it, but there was that inner competition with myself that I had to do it properly. And one of the things, my father was such a dedicated actor. He was always striking to be better than himself at each time, to a level of looking for perfection, maybe. And I always tried to do things to perfection. And that was one of the things with that. I was like, I was climbing this pole and I got stuck about halfway up. What happened was I started off really, really going well. Yep, this is easy. Boom, 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 boom. I was about three-quarters of the way up. And then I looked down and they always say never look down. That's kind of silly. And it was kind of silly. And so my legs started to shake and I got frozen right in the spot. And I started to question why I was doing it, why I felt I had to be perfect, why it mattered to me that I got to the top and showed everybody else how to do it. And it went back to that idea that I always wanted my dad to be proud of me and that, I was striving for perfection. And I realized there in that moment, this is what my best looks like. And I started to listen. It was a real good moment of being in the present moment. There was one of the leaders on the ground was shouting up to me, what would it mean to get to the top? And I was like, yeah, but the top seemed so far away at that point. And then she said, "What would it mean to get to the next rung of the pole?" And I was like, "Well, that wouldn't mean anything because it would be kind of mediocre, and I don't do mediocre. I'm either all in and I'll do it to the very best, or I'm not in at all. I don't do things halfway." And I was still stuck there. I was shaking, and I just couldn't. My body was kind of paralyzed. And then she said, one more time, she asked me again, "What would it mean to get to the next rung?" And I actually stopped to really hear what she asked. And I thought, well, if I could get to the next rung, then the pressure would be off my left leg and it would move onto my right, and therefore it would stop shaking. And that would give me some momentum and some movement. So I just need to get to the next rung. And so I did that, and sure enough, it started to free me up. And I went, it's easy. It's just one bite size at a time. You don't have to do the whole thing. You don't have to peer when you're driving in the dark. You don't have to peer out beyond the headlights. Just see what's in front of you in the headlight beam. And I got to the top, but as soon as I got to the top, I fell off. I got unbalanced. I fell off. So I didn't actually jump for the trapeze. And I came back down to, they belayed you down. Obviously, I was on a safety line and got down on the ground, and everybody was cheering, oh, you did brilliantly. And I was like, I was beating myself up. And I went, no, I didn't. I didn't do it perfectly. And right after me, there was another lady who had one arm who was actually paralyzed. And she started to go up now. It took her a lot of time to actually get as far as she got. And I want to say she was like 7 or 10 rungs up. And at that point, she was delighted with herself, and she turned around, signaled to the guys on the belay, and just said, okay, that's it, I'm done. And she was overjoyed with herself. And I thought, why am I beating myself up? You know, I got way further than she did. But for her, that was her, what she'd set out to do, and she did it, and it didn't matter. She didn't have to be perfect. And that really has changed my outlook on life and in breaking things down into baby steps, and also to be kind to yourself and go down the road of self-forgiveness when you feel, I should have, the whole I should have doesn't work. It just holds you back, and it doesn't give you any hope to try something new. So I would say that probably was one of my most profound locations and events, if you like.
There were times throughout your journeys where you didn't follow through. You had, said that you were going to volunteer in a certain place and you did back out. So tell us a little bit about those, because you did some amazing things like tagging sea turtles and putting them back in the ocean and studying coral reefs and the dolphins, spending time with dolphins. You swam with humpback whales. But there were times when you said to yourself, no, this is not for me. So, can you give us a little bit of insight about your thinking at those times and why you did it and what was going on in those situations that made you pull back?
hmm Well, there's two that come to mind in particular. One was in Malaysia and the other one was in Vietnam. And the one in Malaysia was I went to volunteer for this small mom and pop company that did sunset sails for tourists. And my job was to help with the catering on board. And it was like day trips and or evening trips. And because I had worked in the hotel industry and I was trained in food safety, the people there were not really paying attention to food safety, and I was very concerned people were going to get ill. I mean, there was seafood out left lying in the sun a couple of hours. And I was like, oh God, you need to put that in the fridge. If there is a fridge, you need to. People were, mixing coleslaw with their bare hands and not, washing their hands because they didn't have enough water. And I was like, this is not good. Had I had enough time and stayed like a little longer, I could have actually felt like I made a difference and say, well, maybe we shouldn't do it this way. Here's the way. But at the same time, I was just one of another bunch of volunteers. And when I kind of raised it with the leaders of this group, I wasn't getting anywhere at all. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to keep my mouth shut. I am going to get very frustrated and I'm, maybe blow it on them, and make it very difficult for them with their clients. I think I need to step away from this because it's just goes against my core values in terms of just food safety alone. And I also felt at that time they were kind of abusing the volunteers. I mean, they really should have had, people local in the area that they hired. I felt like they were just giving them, a place like a mat to sleep on the floor and then getting free labor. So I just thought this doesn't feel right at all. So I kind of took a step back from that one pretty quickly. But the other one was more about me, and this was in Vietnam, and it was I came to teach English as a foreign language. And when I got there into Vietnam, I realized that the sounds in Hanoi, the bustle, the hustle, the movement, the city of the whole thing. For a lot of people, that's it's so atmospheric, and the horns, the scooters, and the beeping, and the people. It was like people love that. That to me was like a nightmare. And I would consider myself, I don't think it's quite like diagnosed as highly sensitive person, but I'm very sensitive to my environment like that. I love being outdoors in nature, in the water, in calm places. I'm not a city girl. And so I found that very, very difficult. And they did have a bunch of different volunteers coming in. So I didn't feel like I was going to let them down too much, although I did beat myself up a little bit about that. But I started to have this argument with myself, and it was like my ego and my spirit were having this discussion as to, you said you'd come, so you should follow through and just suck it up and get on with it. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be at my best. I'm not going to be contributing the way I should. And eventually, it was like 24 hours later, I said, I have got to leave. This doesn't feel right to me. And again, it's like listening to your gut instinct. And I decided, I've got to leave. And I explained to the guy, I said, look, these are the reasons I have to leave. I'm so sorry. And they went, no, that's fine. We've got other people coming in. And I literally got on a plane and I went to Thailand, I believe, after that. And I think that's one of the greatest things we can do is give ourselves permission to say it's okay. You don't have to do everything you set out to do. It's okay to make a U-turn. It's okay to reassess the situation. And it's certainly okay to listen to your gut instincts. Because for me, they've never really steered me wrong at all. It's when I don't listen to them, I get into trouble.
So when were you able to say that I know Neef well enough to know that this noise, this honking of the scooters, this busy, busy traffic is not for me? Where in your life were you able to say, this is what I can live with and this is what I can't? For those of us that maybe don't know who we are yet, what made you understand who you are well enough to say yes or no?
That's an interesting question. I think it comes from one of my relationships. I remember being in the wrong relationship for me. And I got to a point where I sublimated who I was as a person in order to make it work. And I stuck at it, convinced that I could make it work. It was supposed to work. I've set out on this journey, therefore, I've got to see it through to the end. And it took me an awful long time to give myself permission to say, no, not all relationships work. It's okay to step away. And that for me was when I realized I was compromising who I was as a person. And I can't really give it in words as to what exactly that is, but it's kind of like a knowing. And I think underneath it all, we can lie to ourselves for a long time as to what's really important to us and where our true value is. And I think some of that comes from wanting to fit in, wanting to be liked, wanting to be appreciated, wanting approval. And I think once you get to a place where you understand how to love yourself and be okay with that, then the rest starts to become clear as those moments appear. I don't think you can right before it sort of say, okay, in this situation, I'm going to react like this. And it's, I'm sure you have it where you're talking to somebody else and you're listening to their situation, and you might be able to say, oh, I understand. Well, really, you don't. You don't understand exactly their position. You can understand the situational part of it. It's like whatever it is, but you don't know how they're reacting or coping with it because you don't know their complete backstory. You don't know what led them to this moment. You don't know what influences they have coming into a decision or what baggage that they're trying to lose. And I can always say, well, I can't imagine how that feels for somebody else. And I really don't know if I was in that situation, how I would react, because I really don't know for sure until I'm actually in the situation. I could have said to you years ago, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to Vietnam. Well, what if it doesn't work out? Oh, don't worry. I mean, I'm going and I'm going to stick to my plan. That's what I would have said. And I didn't know until I was in that situation how I would genuinely react. And I think letting go of expectations of living your life as somehow as how other people feel you should live your life. I think that's where it gets very confusing. And there is no right or wrong way. There's who you are, and once you get in tune with that, it feels like it's smooth sailing.
Because, when I think about the pole, the big tall pole, you told, baby steps, like take one step at a time, baby steps, baby steps. And you got just about to the top, right? And yet in Hanoi, it wasn't even baby steps. It was like that first day, you just knew. So
Mhm.
I guess it's a process of as we live life, we just get better at knowing what's for us, what we maybe can do right away, what maybe we just need to take it slow and we can get through this, or I only have so much time left in my life. Do I really want to be bothered to get used to this? You have a saying in your book, and it was a therapist that told you this. Why wait one more day to be happy? And
Yes.
that made a profound impact on you, Niamh. And why was that? Why was that so profound for you?
It was because it was actually back to that relationship I mentioned. It was because I stayed way longer than I knew I should, because I felt it was one of those things where I couldn't give myself permission to leave. And it was that therapist who went, Dana, she was absolutely amazing. She turned around to me that day and she said to me, I don't know what your decision is going to be, and I'm not telling you what's the right decision for you. But if it is your decision to leave, why wait one more day to be happy? And I had put off making the decision for the preceding 2 years. I knew in my heart and in my soul, this is not the right place for me to be. And yet I've committed to this, and therefore I have to make it work. I have to make it work. Surely it'll work. There's got to be things I can change, etc., etc. And I was just beating myself to a point where I've got to make this work because I couldn't give myself permission to leave. I just couldn't do it. I just thought that's the easy way out. No, it's hard for a reason. You need to stick at this. And then when she said that to me, it was like, oh, it was like somebody, opening a jail and letting me go out, walk out the door. And that did have a profound effect on me. And like you mentioned there about, the older we get and the more life experience we have, the more we, I think, tune into those events, if you like, and how they can impact you. And similarly, like, it's the same with people in your life. I mean, you can come across people that are great friends at a period in your life, but then either you outgrow them or you suddenly realize you're actually definitely poles apart, and it's not in either of your best interests to spend quality time together. So I've got very circumspect with like that. Just like that, we only have a certain amount of time, and it's the older we get, the less the less time hope there is ahead of us, obviously, compared to what we've already lived. And don't waste another minute, on something that's not right for you. Or don't be afraid to make a change. Like, believe it or not, just this morning, my plan was I normally cycle down to the gym, the local gym here, and I was planning to cycle down and work out, come home, cycle back, and go about my day. And I got on the bike. I was a bit late going, and so it was getting pretty hot here in Florida. And I was about a mile down the road, and I went, I'm not really feeling this today. And I said, here's the problem. I feel physically tired. So if I keep going, by the time I get to the gym, I'm going to be just moping about and not really lifting proper heavy weights. And then I'm going to have to cycle back in the heat. And it's pretty hot here at the moment. And I just thought, this is silly. You don't have to do it, but you've got to get some miles in. So I just turned it into a bike ride and I went straight home. And I didn't work out this morning, and that's the beauty of knowing who you are and being at this stage. You just go, it's okay.
You know, when I look at you, you look super fit. And you talk about, right? You talk about going to the gym and lifting weights. You live in Florida, so you can do this type of thing all year round.
Mhm,
You spent years on a sailboat, pulling
mhm,
lines, pulling anchors, doing all the things that a sailboat needs to be done on.
mhm.
But and someone might be watching this show and say, well, yeah, Fran, look at her. I mean, she's super fit and strong and all that kind of stuff. No wonder she can travel all over the world. But you also have a story about that as well.
Well, I haven't always been super fit, and I have struggled with weight most of my life. I am extremely good at losing weight because I've lost the same like 20 to 40 pounds over and over again, and then whoop, goes straight back up again. I've made some pretty serious decisions in the last couple of years about health and longevity and how long am I going to live, and I really want to live in a healthy, they talk now about health span rather than lifespan. And I really don't want to be living, with conditions and being ill. So I'm really, really working on it hard at the moment. Actually, I've cut out a bunch of stuff, especially sugar and everything that has sugar in it as much as I possibly can. And both myself and my husband are really working on it. But I do remember back in, ooh, when was it? Back in 2014, when I was actually living on the island of Sark, I had another kind of spurt of interest in fitness, and I went down to Kenya to do a wild fitness program. And that was not indoors in gyms, but it was out working in the wild, hanging out of trees, jumping over walls, that kind of idea. And at some point, I did another one in the Isle of Wight, and my body was a bit cold when I did it, and I was throwing a boulder, and I ripped the meniscus in my knee. And so I had to have surgery for that. And that was right before actually I ended up taking a year off to go around the world. And I thought I wasn't going to be able to make it. And one of the first things I was doing was actually go up to Sweden to photograph the aurora borealis. And the one of the events that we got to do was incredible. It was to uh, how would you call it? Steer our own sleigh with the a reindeer. I was going to say a mule, but a reindeer. And, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do that. And they gave me one and they explained what it was. And I just thought, I was able to get a wheelchair in Stockholm airport to transfer up to Kiruna. But I thought, no, I'm going to do this. And so I got my knee fixed and kind of moved on and got some of it done. Not to say that, I'm also conscious of some of the stuff now that I won't do. That, I've done a lot of physical things, over the years, like between scuba diving and skydiving and all that kind of stuff. But there's certain elements of stuff like that I won't ever do. Like I'll never bungee jump. I've made that decision years ago. That's not what I want to do. And at this point, I'm getting a little bit more cautious. I don't want to push my body to a point where I really make it too hard on my body, because I'm very grateful to my body taking such good care of me up to this point, despite all the abuse over the years of putting on weight, taking off weight, etc. But now I'm just trying to nurture it. And so that's why this morning I just said, you know what? Listen to your body. No, today's not the day. We're not going to the gym today.
You talk about gaining weight and losing weight. And in the book, it talks about how your future husband, um, Gary, who was Captain Gary on the boat you volunteered on, the sailboat that you volunteered on, you and he were together for months and months and months, alone in the ocean. Nothing else to talk about, really. But you two fell in love. And at one point, he said something very profound to you about the weight. What did he say?
Well, part of it was that I was using weight to cover up maybe a childhood trauma. I had been molested as a child, excuse me. And he said, "Did you ever correlate those two things?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well, have a look at that, you know." And he started to teach me this art of self-forgiveness. He has a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And he started to explain to me, you know, the truth is ABC. I forgive myself for believing that it was my fault. The truth is I was a child and somebody took advantage of me. And what we kind of learned was that over the years, when anybody, when I would lose weight and I'd be within inches of my goal weight, people would start to notice and they would turn around, they'd say to me, "Oh, you look amazing." And for some reason, at some subconscious level, that put fear into me. And I think subconsciously I would start to eat my way back to fat again because I didn't want to be that vulnerable. And I think once he explained to me that that was a possibility, that that's what was behind it, um, I started to see that food, but food was also a comfort as well, you know, and food, alcohol, anything like that. I never did drugs, so that wasn't ever an issue. Thankfully, I was blessed that that never got it because I kind of have an addictive type of nature. If I'm doing something, I'm all in, like I said earlier. So thank God drugs was never an issue for me. I think I knew myself well enough when I was young enough to know that if I went down that road, it wouldn't be a good road for me. But he really taught me the art of self-forgiveness and to identify why is it what we do? Why do we react the way we react? What is the baggage we bring into this part of our lives? And so, because we lived on the sailboat for so long, and he was my final volunteer project actually that year. I was only supposed to stay on the boat for a month, and we ended up with some very deep, profound conversations during that month because we'd no cell service, no internet. We were out at sea. So we really got to know each other from the inside out and as two human beings, as opposed to, oh, here's a potential boyfriend, girlfriend, you know? And yes, we fell in love at a soul level. And here we are, 10 years later, we're still together. And now we're both working together as speakers on cruise ships. So it's all worked, you know, full circle, if you like, back on the
Yeah.
water.
It's a really sweet part of the book because you do talk about the romance, which was not easy, right?
Mhm.
There were some things that happened on the boat, like the mast that broke, and also kind of being stranded between Florida and Bahamas when the motor shut down on the boat. So there were moments that were rocky, and you could have said, you're packing it in. You're not coming back. And yet you chose not to. And there was, you called him the axe murderer, the potential axe murderer in the book, but did the hairs on your neck never go up? I mean, here you're, like there's waves that are 2 and 3 meters high, and you're on a sailboat. What made you stay?
Well, interestingly, it was actually my family who had said to me, you know, you're going to go to sea with a man you've never met on a boat you don't know anything about. How do you know he's not an axe murderer? Right? So they were very reticent about my doing it. I, at that stage, had done the year around the world. I had been in some very strange situations where, you know, the hairs on the back of my neck did go up, and I kind of removed myself as we talked. But in this instance, I had said to them, I'll trust my instincts. I'll know. I'm going to meet him on land. I'll get a good vibe on him and I'll know. And sure enough, I did. So I was never fearful in that respect. Now, as far as the elements are concerned, and as far as his experience, he was a pretty new sailor. I mean, incredible. He learned how to sail in his 60s and decided to buy a boat. He was 68 and I'm going to sail off into the sunset. So, I mean, very brave human being. We did run into some, ugly storms and stuff like that where we were both challenged. But it was another part of our relationship as it was developing is we had to rely on each other for our safety. And in that there was absolute trust. And the irony of that whole story about the axe murderers, his friends had said to him at the time, you know, you're going to take this woman on your boat. You've never met her before. How do you know she's not a modern day pirate who's going to steal your boat and bump you overboard when you're 12 miles offshore? So we both actually trusted our instincts in that respect. And I think it really, really was a case of the universe conspiring in our favor to bring us together because we were both from very different backgrounds and there's no chance we would have met in real life. He was born and raised in Los Angeles, and of course me being in Ireland, 5,000 miles apart. Who would have thought we'd have ended up on a 40-foot sailboat, sailing around the Bahamas? It was just, you wouldn't even dream of it. So we're both very grateful and very blessed for that. And yeah, we did have our moments. I remember one time we got into a bit of a ding dong. We were trying to dock the boat in one of the Bahamian islands, and it wasn't going well at all. I thought we were going to do a lot of damage to other boats. The wind had taken hold of us, and he was trying to man the wheel. I was trying to fend us off from the bow, and it was very tense. And I, at that point, after it was all over, it calmed down. I just stormed off. But as far as the bow, like where could you go after that? Nowhere. And that was a really good one for me. I think had that been on land, I might have walked away. But because of the circumstances of being on a boat in the ocean, there was nowhere to go. So I had to turn around, face the situation, sit down with them, and we found a way to talk it through. And those kind of events really strengthened our relationship. And even today, if we have an argument now, we both know that underneath it, it's a rock solid foundation. And we will work it out. We'll figure it out. We know we have a thing now called the first fix and the second fix. So we know that we're initially going to get it to a point of everybody be calm. And yeah, we're still like maybe grumpy underneath, but we're calm enough to be, not out of control. And then it could be later that day, it could be a day or two afterwards when there's absolutely no emotional charge left to whatever the event is. Then we'll sit down and say, well, you know what? This is what I heard, or this is how I felt when you said this, or this is how it landed on me. Nothing to do with you. This is old tapes, old baggage that I've brought from previous scenarios. And we work our way through it. And we have found if you don't do that, then some version of the same row will reappear until you get the message and you learn the lesson. And a lot of times now we sort of said, oh, need to go for the double fix. It's not quite all fixed yet because you walk away from an argument going, I still don't think, I didn't get to say all my stuff that I wanted to say. And we find that very, very important.
That's a testament to the maturity, both of your maturity. I mean, he's got the master's degree in spiritual psychology, and you've got all of your life experiences as well, meeting so many different people around the world, so many different situations, so many different living styles and lifestyles. And if the two of you and your experiences, you've got the maturity to be able to say, it's not you, it's my stuff, it's my baggage, and I am still working through that. Just stay with me while I work through it. And just the love and the camaraderie and like you said, the trust that you've got in each other, it helps you through.
Mhm.
So you talked about cruise ships. What do you do on the cruise ships?
Well, we give talks. I don't know if you've been on cruises, but they have the entertainment in the theaters at night. But then on the sea days, in the mornings, they have guest entertainers like ourselves, guest speakers on what they call enrichment programs. So we speak on a lot of different things. Actually, one of our talks is on how what is it really like to live on a sailboat, and we talk about relationships in that respect, as to how you navigate it in tight quarters. We've another talk we give on Flares Up, which is another one of my books about the two men who rowed across the Atlantic Ocean in a 20-foot wooden boat. And we had them on our we had them for their first home cooked meal on our sailboat the next night. And they found out I was a writer. And we talked about their story. And that one is about why they did it, how it affected their families, and how that experience changed them as human beings. So we really talk about, overcoming and being an underdog. And, it's a very, very inspiring story. And we've had people come up to us after, which is just, it's like why we do what we do. This lady came up to us on the last ship we were on, and she said, I'm 60 years old. She says, after listening to that, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to learn how to swim. And I thought that was fantastic. So those are reasons we share it. We do share stuff, our own story on Following Sunshine. We have another one on laughter yoga that we do, which we both got trained in, and some stories about people that have sponsored. One of the stories, I had sponsored a child down in Bolivia, and we tell the story of how that worked and how that changed his life. And really, it's about a combination of entertaining and also giving people hope that they can start again. There is more. When you think it's over, it's not over, and there's more that you can push for, or to just reach out, even if it's as simple as somebody you haven't spoken to in a long time. Just pick up the phone, make that call. If in your gut or somebody pops into your mind, like the other day, somebody popped into my head that I hadn't thought about in about 15 years. And in the old days, you'd kind of let that go. Well, no, instead, now you just send a text. You know what I mean? Oh, I was thinking of you. And that you don't know what that's going to do or how that's going to lift somebody else's day. So that's what we do. And we have a wonderful time because now we're on a ship that there's somebody else worried about the weather. There's somebody else who's the galley slave. Somebody else is out on deck in the bad weather. So we love that experience, and we're still on the water and we get to do it together. That's wonderful.
Beautiful. So we're almost out of time. What are your last words of hope for someone who maybe is considering doing some traveling, maybe solo traveling, or going to places that are a bit off the beaten trail, as you did, whether they're doing it to volunteer or whether they're just doing it as a tourist? What are your last words of hope for our viewers?
I think the hope is within, and if you look deep inside, you know what you want. You know you can do it, and there's you can do by yourself. You can go with other people. It can also be something to just stay at home. And I think once when somebody says to you, "Oh, well, I don't know," the answer to that is yes, you do. You just haven't given yourself permission to say it yet.
Wonderful. Is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't talked on yet?
Oh, we've covered quite a lot, haven't we? We've covered quite a lot. I think that's the ultimate is to try and live in the now. This is all we have. It's each moment. We've just got here and now today. And if we can be present in those moments, I think that's where we really can live.
I agree. So you also have a writing program. Can you talk a little bit about your writing program for those viewers that might be interested in trying it out?
Yes, one of the talks actually we give on the cruise ships is to write your story or write your memoir, and also, writing creative nonfiction or even, fiction. And it's designed to get you to understand yourself and to reach in and to start the writing process. And so we bring out a newsletter every quarter. It used to be monthly, but we've been just so busy, it's now quarterly. But we also have separate to that, we have writing tips that people can do on subscription. And we teach both of us how to write from the heart, how to write from the soul. We have another one on journaling in the wild and photography in the wild, and capturing those experiences and learning from it. I think most of us, when we have to process something, are able to turn to something creative like writing, like painting, like music. I think we all go down that road, and that's where we can find the joy and we can find the way to process out of something. And certainly for me, it's in the writing.
And how can we get a hold of you, whether it's to read more about your story or to find Following Sunshine, the book Following Sunshine, or the other book that you talked about,
Flares up.
Flares Up? And you've also
Yes.
got other writings that you've done as well. Where can we find you and where can we find your books?
Sure. So the main place to get a hold of us is through the website, which is thewriteronthewater.com. So that's my website, thewriteronthewater.com. And most of my social media is The Writer on the Water. And then as far as our books are concerned, in terms of, across the countries, it's the on Amazon. They're all available on Amazon now. And I believe Following Sunshine now is in 5 different languages, including French. So for your Canadians that are French speaking, it's now translated to French, Portuguese, German, and Italian, I believe, as well as English. So yeah, on Amazon is another place to find them.
It's a beautiful book. It's an
Thank you.
easy read, and it's just beautiful the way you've written it. You've got a real skill with that.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And so thank you to everyone who joined us today. I encourage you to read the book. I believe it's now on Audible as well for those people that like to listen to books on. And I think, Niamh, did you narrate it on
I
Audible?
did actually. Yes, I've narrated all my books. Yeah, they're up there and I narrate them.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, you've got that beautiful accents. It's so easy to listen to, right? Take a look, download it if you can. It's a beautiful story of traveling around the world and of finding love. And thank you to all our viewers who tuned in today. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. It will help Neef get her ideas out and her books out, as well as help me and get the ideas of hope out, because there's hope in so many places. All we need to do is just keep on looking for it, one step at a time. So thank you, Neve, and thank you to everyone else.
Thank you so much. And the other thing to leave you with is it's never too late.
I agree. Never too late. God bless.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
This podcast and inspired healing hypnotherapy do not provide medical advice. The information included here is not limited to text, graphics, images, or other material contained, and are for informational purposes only. No material in this podcast is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment, and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this site.